My phone lit up with my son's name, Ethan. I smiled, just for a second. I thought maybe he wanted to tell me about the rehearsal dinner, or to ask if I'd ironed his father's old tie for the wedding. Instead, his voice came through the line flat, practiced. Mom. I just wanted you to hear it from me before you see the listing. I sold the house. Madison and I needed the money for our new condo and the wedding. The deal's done. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. On my email screen, the contract already waiting. Property sale, $418,000. Seller signature, Evelyn Brooks. My name wasn't there at all. Not even a mention. That house, the one Adam and I built board by board, the one where my son learned to walk, where every corner smelled of lavender polish and old paper, gone, with a click. My son had sold everything I owned, for her. I sat very still, the phone slipping from my hand. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound left in the house. How could he do this to me? If you want to know what happened next, how I lost everything, and what justice finally found its way back to me, stay with me. Because this story is not about revenge. It's about awakening. My name is Evelyn Brooks, and until that April evening I believed my life could be folded neatly into a drawer. I was 67, a retired librarian after 39 years of shelved spines, whispering teenagers, and the soft thud of returned books. I liked clocks that kept time, receipts filed by month, and a kettle that clicked off the moment steam curled. Our house on Maple Street, 3 bedrooms, a stubborn pear tree, a porch light that glowed like a small moon, was the ledger of our days. I dusted it on Fridays, the way you dust a photograph you love. I met Adam in the reference section in 1978. He asked for city maps and left with my number on a checkout slip. He was patient with wood and impatient with lies. One winter we framed the living room ourselves, passing boards like prayers. He died 12 years ago on a dry September afternoon, a quiet heart attack in the yard. The last thing he built was a cedar bench. The last thing he said was, "You'll manage, Evie. You always do." I have lived, mostly, by that blessing, and by the cedar's faint, clean scent that lingers on cool evenings. Our son, Ethan, grew from a thin-kneed boy into a man whose calendar was always full. As a child, he read beneath the porch light with a blanket around his shoulders, underlining sentences as if they were instructions for living. When he was 9, he wrote me a note in pencil, "I will always take care of you, Mom," and tucked it into the cookbook drawer. I kept it there for years, then moved it to my wallet, the crease worn smooth by time. As an adult he preferred spreadsheets to stories, a tidy dresser with good hair and a watch that never ran late. I adjusted, the way mothers do. Madison arrived 2 summers ago at a 4th of July picnic, glossy as a magazine cover. She worked at a firm with a marble lobby and liked to say so. She spoke to me as if I were a sweet but outdated appliance. "Evelyn, you're so organized," she'd say, tilting her head. "It's admirable." She brushed invisible lint from Ethan's sleeve and looked past me toward the bigger table. I told myself she was nervous. I told myself I was protecting peace. They liked my lasagna, my stories about the cedar bench, the photo where Ethan, 3 years old, grins with jam on his face. They took selfies under the pear tree and told me the house felt classic. When their lease ended, Ethan said, "Mom, the market's wild. You should consider adding me to the title, just a safeguard, for probate and taxes." He said it lightly, like dusting. I was not naive, I asked questions. He answered with numbers and a smile I had spent a lifetime trusting. I signed what he said in front of me, believing it let him help me someday, not take what I had now. After that, small things slid. Dinners turned into texts. My questions about the wedding became "will let you know." On my 67th birthday they sent white lilies and a card in her careful hand, "To many elegant years ahead." I blew out one candle alone and filed the florist's invoice under March. Sometimes I caught Ethan's eyes drifting around my living room like a realtor taking inventory, the oak sideboard, the blue and cream rug, the framed map of Santa Fe we used to point at and say, one day. I thought he was admiring my care. Now I know he was measuring. Still, I kept my routines. Morning, open the curtains, check the bank app, water the jade plant. Afternoon, read in the sunroom, call the pharmacy, wipe the counters in patient circles. Evening, tea in the blue mug, the porch light on, Adam's bench holding the quiet like a bowl. I wore the same soft scarf when it turned cool, gray with a thin teal stripe. The keys lived on a hook by the door, heavy as a promise. I believed we were a family with disagreements, not a ledger waiting to be balanced. I believed Ethan's always and Madison's polished smile could coexist with my slow, bookish life. If there were calculations being done, they were not mine. I hoarded paper clips, not power. I collected library due date stamps in a jar, not people's debts. When Ethan spoke about markets, I heard weather. When Madison said modern, I heard helpful. That was my mistake, translating their language into mine. Who were they, really? My son and his fiancée, yes, but also two young professionals who trusted speed over patience, leverage over listening. They saw a woman alone in a paid-off house and mistook stewardship for weakness. They liked plans that clicked into place, and a house, to them, was a plan, equity, escrow, upgrades, exit. To me it was where the floor creaked near the pantry and where Adam's sweater still smelled faintly of pine. We all said we were practical. We were not, as it turned out, practical in the same way. I am not helpless. I want you to understand that before we go further. I have a steel core that does not rattle, a drawer labeled wills and a folder labeled taxes. I know how to ask questions and how to keep my voice level when the answer stings. I am the woman who can find a lost book by its weight in the hand. I am the woman who writes the bulb change date on the box, October 14th, 22, and puts the box on the second shelf, left side. My memory is a ledger, but it is not for sale. And they, Ethan with his polite smile, Madison with her badge clipped to her blazer, were not villains to me, not then. They were busy. They were ambitious. They wanted a lifestyle the house could finance. I told myself they loved me, even as their love leaned on my walls. I told myself the pear tree would give fruit next year. I told myself many things. Until the call, I believed most of them. It began with a comment that pretended to be concern. One quiet Sunday, Ethan stood in the doorway of my living room, hands in his pockets, scanning the shelves as if the books might whisper a secret to him. "Mom," he said, "have you ever thought about downsizing? This house could sell for a fortune right now." I looked up from the crossword. "Downsizing from what?" I asked. "It's just me and the books. We fit." He smiled the way people do when they think they're being kind. "Exactly. You don't need all this space." Madison's voice came from behind him, bright and soft as tissue paper. "She means, Ethan, it's about her memories. Right, Evelyn? Still, you could use that money for something more modern. A smaller place. A condo maybe." Her hand rested lightly on his arm, as if she were steering him, and me, toward reason. I remember the smell of lemon polish rising from the table. The house was clean, warm, alive. I smiled, though it felt like holding air in my lungs. "I like my space," I said simply. "It's already paid for." Madison gave a practiced laugh. "Of course. But money sitting in walls isn't doing anything for you." That sentence hung in the air, slick and heavy. Money sitting in walls. I'd never thought of my house as currency, only as shelter. Ethan changed the subject, but something in me shifted, just slightly. A tremor no one else could hear. Over the next weeks, small remarks began to gather like dust in corners. Madison would glance at the curtains and murmur, "Vintage charm." Her tone made vintage sound halfway to outdated. Ethan asked, "You still balance your checkbook by hand?" As though I'd said I churned my own butter. They called less often. When they did, the calls were quick, traffic noise, half answers, we'll talk later. I started to notice pauses that used to be filled with laughter. If I suggested dinner, Madison had a meeting. If I offered help with the wedding, she said, oh, it's all handled. One afternoon, I dropped by their apartment with a basket of scones still warm from the oven. Madison opened the door only a crack. We're just heading out, she said. Her lipstick was perfect, her smile a doorstop. I caught a glimpse of Ethan inside, buttoning his cufflinks. He looked at me with the polite discomfort of a stranger caught in a mirror. I'll call you, Mom, he said. He didn't. On my birthday in March, I set the table for 3 out of habit. At 6 o'clock, a delivery van stopped outside. The driver handed me a white box of flowers, lilies, and a card in Madison's handwriting, to many elegant years ahead. No visit. No call. Just the faint scent of lilies filling a too-quiet room. I poured myself tea in the blue mug Adam had given me on our 20th anniversary. The steam fogged my glasses. I remember thinking, they're busy. This is just how things are now. But beneath that thought was another, they are preparing me for something. In April, Ethan stopped by to check the mail situation. He stood in the entryway, scrolling through his phone. Madison thinks it's time you set up automatic bill pay, he said. You know, simplify. I'm not complicated, I replied. He chuckled, not unkindly. You know what I mean. She just worries about you handling everything alone. Does she? I said. He didn't look up. Later that night, I went through my file drawers, wills, taxes, mortgage, insurance. Everything labeled, dated, and in order. My husband's handwriting still appeared on the oldest tabs, steady as a ruler line. There was no reason to worry. Still, I slept lightly. A week later, Madison called. Evelyn, I found a great financial advisor for you, she said. I already have one. Oh, I just thought maybe someone younger, more proactive. There it was again, the polite erasure wrapped in sugar. I told her I'd think about it. She sounded pleased, as if I'd agreed. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and reread Ethan's childhood note, I will always take care of you, Mom. The pencil had faded to silver. I wondered if promises expire like warranties. By early spring, they had stopped inviting me to Sunday dinners altogether. I learned about their engagement party from a neighbor who saw photos online. Madison in a pale pink dress, Ethan beside her, champagne raised. The caption read, New Beginnings. Not a word to me. When I mentioned it later, Ethan said, oh, it was last minute. Just friends from her work. Of course, I said. Work friends. He kissed my cheek, quick and distracted, then checked his phone again. I remember standing by the window after he left, watching his car turn the corner. The pear tree had begun to bloom, white petals scattering like tiny confetti. From a distance, it could have been a wedding. Up close, it looked like loss. I started keeping notes, little records in my day planner, as if cataloging a collection. March 2nd, no call on birthday. March 12th, asked about automatic payments. March 19th, mentioned selling house in theory. April 3rd, stopped by without knocking, asked about mail forwarding. It sounds obsessive, I know, but I have always believed that facts protect you when feelings fail. Every time the wind moved the curtains, I imagined voices I used to hear, Adam calling from the yard, Ethan laughing at a spilled bowl of popcorn. The house had never felt so large, or so silent. The first crack in anything is rarely loud. It's a hairline seam, invisible until light slips through. I didn't yet know that the light I saw was from a fire already burning. The day before the call that changed everything, I found a business card tucked under a pile of mail, Madison Reeve, Associate Partner, Brighton and Hale Realty. On the back, in her neat handwriting, let's make things happen. I placed it in the drawer with the note from my son, the two pieces of paper brushing against each other like strangers forced to share a seat. That's when I finally admitted something was coming. I just didn't know from which direction. After that spring, the house began to echo. Not from emptiness exactly, but from distance, a sound that comes when love keeps its shoes on at the door. Ethan's messages turned into single sentences. Busy today, Mom. Talk soon. Madison says hi. I still replied with full paragraphs, polite and hopeful, as if punctuation could bridge silence. By May, the invitations stopped altogether. They spoke of plans but never included me in them. The wedding's coming together, Ethan said one afternoon, stirring his coffee like it needed rescuing. Small, intimate, just people our age. I nodded. Of course. You don't want too many old librarians cluttering the dance floor. He smiled but didn't deny it. The next week, Madison came by alone, unannounced. She stood on my porch holding a clipboard and a smile so polite it might have been laminated. Evelyn, she said, you'll think I'm being silly, but do you know your roof is outdated? Ethan worries about you up here alone if something leaks. We could get a quote, no pressure. I looked at her perfect manicure resting on my doorframe. It's held 30 years, I said. It'll hold longer than that lipstick. She blinked. Then she laughed, too lightly, and changed the subject to the weather. When she left, I found her business card slipped between my mail again. Madison Reeve, Associate Partner, Brighton and Hale Realty. The same firm, the same handwriting on the back, timing is everything. That summer, I saw less of them. My calls went to voicemail. My texts read delivered but never read. Once, I drove past their new condo downtown, glass, steel, a gym visible through the lobby window. Through the reflection, I saw Ethan helping Madison carry in shopping bags, laughing at something I would never hear. I sat in the car for a long minute. The air conditioning hummed like a distant tide. Then I drove home and scrubbed the kitchen counters until my hands smelled of bleach. The next day, a letter arrived from my bank. Change of contact information request, pending verification. My stomach tightened. I hadn't made any changes. When I called, the clerk said, "Oh, we received an online form, Mrs. Brooks. It listed your son as joint contact." Routine. Routine, I repeated. My voice was calm, my heartbeat wasn't. I told her to cancel the request immediately. That evening, I printed the email confirmation and placed it in a folder labeled security. The tension didn't come as argument, it came as politeness. The kind that seals rather than soothes. Evelyn, you don't need to worry about the wedding costs, Madison said over lunch one afternoon. Ethan and I have a plan. That's good, I replied. Plans are important. She smiled like someone who had already won. Later, Ethan called. Mom, Madison's been stressed. Maybe give her some space, okay? She feels you're over-involved. I haven't even been invited to anything, I said. He sighed. You know what I mean. No, I didn't. But I didn't argue. I hung up, poured myself tea, and sat by the window. The pear tree was heavy with fruit that year, more than I could ever eat. I filled baskets for the neighbors, left one on the porch for Ethan and Madison. The next morning it was gone, but the thank you text never came. One night, I dreamed that Adam knocked on the door and asked, "Who are these people in our house?" I woke with the sound of his hammer still echoing in my ears. The clock read 3:11 a.m. I got up, turned on the lamp, and went through my papers again. Everything looked in order, but I noticed something strange, the deed copy missing from its sleeve. I checked twice, 3 times. Nothing. The folder was there, the label home, title and insurance in Adam's handwriting, but the main document gone. The next morning, I called Ethan. Oh, right, he said, after a pause too long to be honest. I took it last month. Madison's firm needed it for some insurance thing. Without asking? Mom, please. It's safe. Don't worry so much. He said it like comfort, but it sounded like dismissal. The small slights became a rhythm. A weekend visit postponed, a forgotten Mother's Day, my suggestions met with polite nods that ended conversations. I tried to keep faith in the story I'd built around my son, the good man, the thoughtful boy under the porch light, but the story had cracks now, and through them, truth leaked slowly. One afternoon in late July, I stopped by the old library to return some donated books. Behind the counter, Martha, who'd worked with me for years, said, "Evelyn, I saw Ethan and his fiancée on the Realty website, their testimonials featured something about helping a family property transaction go smoothly." The world tilted slightly. "What property?" I asked. She frowned. "Didn't you know?" I smiled the way a person does when she feels the floor moving beneath her and wants no one to see. "Oh, of course," I said. "I just forgot." That evening, I found their photo online, Ethan and Madison standing in front of my house. The caption read, "Another happy sale." I printed the page and laid it on the table. My tea went cold beside it. For a long time, I just stared at the image, the angle, the lighting, the small plaque with my address blurred in the background. I told myself it was promotional, staged. Surely that was it. But inside, something quiet and old, something that had survived loss before, began to prepare itself. I didn't know yet what they had done. Only that the air in my house no longer belonged entirely to me. And that, perhaps, it never had. The night it happened, the air had the soft weight of early spring rain. I'd just finished washing the teacup when the phone lit up on the counter. "Ethan." For a moment, I smiled, foolishly glad. It had been weeks since I'd heard his voice. "Mom," he began, low and even, the tone people use to deliver bad news they've already rehearsed. "I just wanted you to hear it from me before you see the listing." I felt a pause widen between us. "Listing?" "I sold the house. Madison and I needed the money for our condo and the wedding. The deal's done." At first, I thought he was joking, some misguided attempt at humor. "You sold what?" "The house," he repeated. "Ours." "Well, technically, mine too. Remember, you added my name to the title years ago for tax reasons." My breath thinned. I remembered the paper, one of many, handed across a kitchen table years earlier. I'd signed without question because he was my son. "You sold my house, Ethan?" "Mom, please don't make this harder than it is," he said. "You'll have your own place soon. Madison found a really nice condo for you near the lake. Less maintenance, safer." I didn't hear the rest. My eyes were already on my laptop. My email inbox glowed with a new message, property sale confirmation. I opened the attachment. Property address, 412 Maple Street. Sale price, $418,000. Seller signature, Ethan Brooks. Buyer signature, confidential. No mention of me. Not even in the copy line. For a second, everything in the room tilted, the clock, the kettle, the framed photo of Adam in his work apron. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator, steady and indifferent. "Ethan," I said quietly, "you had no right." He sighed, exasperated. "I'm trying to help you. You don't need all that space, and the market's perfect. Madison handled everything legally." "Legally?" I whispered. "Without the owner's consent?" "You're overreacting." His voice sharpened. "This is for your benefit. You'll thank me when you're settled." The line clicked. He'd ended the call. I stood there, holding the phone like evidence. Outside, rain began to fall, faint and measured, tapping against the windows as if counting seconds. I drove without thinking. My hands remembered the route even if my heart didn't. The city blurred, traffic lights, storefronts, a late bus crawling through the drizzle. I stopped outside their new condo, glass shining like whetstone. Through the lobby's transparent walls, I saw them. Ethan and Madison, seated with her parents at a polished table. Champagne glasses, a stack of documents, pens glinting under the light. Madison leaned forward, pointing to a page. Ethan smiled, a nervous, distracted smile I knew too well. When he saw me through the glass, his face drained. He stood quickly, motioning me to stay outside. But I didn't. I pushed open the door. The security guard started to speak. I walked past him. "Mom," Ethan said, his voice tight, "please don't make a scene." A scene? I lifted the printed contract from my bag, the one I'd downloaded minutes before. "You mean like this?" I held it out. My hand was steady. The rain on my coat sleeve glistened like small coins. "Who gave you the right to sell my home?" Madison rose slowly. "Evelyn," she said, her tone smooth as glass, "technically, Ethan's co-owner. Everything was handled above board. You should have read the fine print." Her words were soft, but each one landed like a slap. Ethan stepped closer. "Mom, it's done. Don't embarrass yourself. You'll be more comfortable where we're putting you. Please." I looked at him, my boy who once built birdhouses in the yard, who cried when the dog died, who promised he'd always take care of me. His eyes were distant now, glassy with guilt or maybe ambition. Behind him, Madison's parents watched, their expressions composed. To them, I wasn't a mother. I was a transaction that had gone through. "I see," I said quietly. "Then congratulations." I folded the contract carefully, placed it back in my bag, and turned toward the door. Madison's voice followed me. "You'll understand someday, Evelyn. We're just thinking ahead." I didn't turn around. "You're thinking only of yourselves," I said. "Someday, you'll understand that." The elevator doors closed between us with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. That night, I checked the online property records myself. There it was, transferred ownership, recorded and sealed. My name still on the old tax form, but gone from the deed. I called the county office, and the clerk confirmed it. "Yes, Mrs. Brooks, the transfer was executed last week. Looks legitimate from here." Legitimate. Such a tidy word for betrayal. When I hung up, I sat in the dark with Adam's cedar bench under the window. The rain outside had turned steady, patient. I took the old house key from my pocket and held it in my palm. It felt lighter than I remembered. By midnight, the shock had drained away, leaving something colder, cleaner. I wasn't hysterical. I wasn't broken. I was awake. I whispered into the quiet, "Enough." Then I placed the key in the wastebasket and listened to it land with a soft, final sound, like the closing of a book. At dawn, I wrote a list on a yellow pad. Call Tom Harlan, Adam's old lawyer. Check bank accounts. Freeze any joint access. Copy all documents. Breathe. Each line steadied me. Each word turned the chaos into order. They had taken my house, but they had not taken my mind. And I intended to use it. I didn't cry that night. Tears would have made it smaller, like a spill you wipe up and forget. I drove to a cheap motel off the highway, the kind with a humming soda machine and a front desk clerk who slid the registration card toward me without looking up. Room 214. A bedspread the color of old moss. Rain on the window like soft applause. I sat on the edge of the bed and placed my house key in my palm. The metal had the memory of 1,000 doors opened, groceries balanced on my wrist, Adam's laugh traveling ahead of me down the hall. I closed my fingers and felt the tooth of the cut metal press into my skin. "Enough," I said again, but this time the word felt like a lever lowering. Something locked into place inside me. I opened my laptop on the small desk. The motel chair wobbled, so I folded a tourist brochure under one leg, Dinosaur Museum, Exit 9. Order first, then action. I logged into the county database and downloaded everything with my address on it, deed history, transfer record, the notarized pages where my name had become a ghost. I saved them into a new folder on my desktop, Maple Evidence. The name steadied me. Next, the bank. 2 accounts showed recent access via linked user. Linked user, E. Brooks. The note field read, information verification following move. Move. I printed the screens to PDFs and saved them alongside the property files. Then I changed my passwords, long strings of words Adam and I used to whisper when something delighted us, Pear Blossom and Library Quiet and the year Ethan learned to ride his bike without wobbling. At 2:13 a.m., I called the after-hours line for Adam's old lawyer, Tom Harlan, and left a message. Tom, it's Evelyn Brooks. I need you. It's urgent. His voicemail still had that rasping steadiness I remembered from our wills meeting. I could almost see him pushing his glasses up his nose, making a note. Sometimes power is just the next phone call. Sometimes it is a folder correctly named. I took out the paper copy of the sale contract and studied the signatures. Ethan's looked like his confident, fast. Mine wasn't there. But on one addendum, a squiggle lived where my initials should have been. The letters leaned wrong. The date format was Madison's, day/month/year instead of my old American habit. Small things tell the truth when people don't. I opened my email and searched Madison and transfer. A thread from 3 weeks earlier surfaced, following up seller disclosures. I had never seen it. In the header, my address showed as Evelyn Brooks. Home at Gmail, not my actual account. A decoy, off by 1 letter. My chest went cold, then steady. I forwarded the thread to myself and printed it to PDF. The printer by the motel vending machines chugged and spat the pages like a creature forced from sleep. At 3:41 a.m., Tom called back. Evelyn? Tell me everything. I told him without adjectives. Dates, amounts, names. I could hear him writing. When I finished, he said, come to my office at 9. Bring copies. We'll start with an injunction and a fraud report. Don't contact them again tonight. I won't, I said. The word tasted clean. I slept for 2 hours, maybe, with the laptop open beside me and the key on the nightstand. When dawn unfolded, a pale square on the motel curtain, I felt older and lighter at once. Grief had burned down to something usable. I stood at the small sink and washed my face with motel soap. It smelled like airports. I folded my scarf, the gray one with the thin teal stripe, and tied it neatly. I have learned that when the world tilts, the rightness of a knot can keep you from falling. Before I left, I took the key, kissed the worn brass, and dropped it into the room's metal trash can. It hit the bottom with a hollow note. Not drama. Procedure. By 7, I was at a coffee shop next to Tom's building with a stack of labeled folders, property, bank, email, phone logs. I added a final one, empty at first, next steps. The barista wrote my name as Evelyn on the cup. Close enough. The coffee was too hot, I waited. I have been waiting, it seems, for years. On the wall, a clock ticked toward 9. I watched the second hand sweep and thought of Ethan as a boy, pressing his ear to the kitchen timer to hear the tiny gears. He used to say, it's talking. I used to answer, it says be patient. Now the sound said something else, pay attention. I am not a woman who smashes windows. I am the woman who reads footnotes. I am the woman who keeps the envelope. If they thought I would stagger, they confused silence with surrender. The rain had thinned to a mist. Outside, the crosswalk signal blinked its white figure forward. I gathered my folders, slipped the blue mug-sized warmth of the paper stack under my arm, and stood. It was time to begin. In that quiet I saw the line between being kept and being safe. I chose the second, I chose myself, one careful documented step. At 9 sharp, I walked into Tom Harlan's office carrying the folders. The receptionist offered coffee. I declined. I wanted a clear head, nothing to soften the edges of what I was about to do. Tom came out from behind his desk, his tie slightly crooked, his expression the same measured calm that had guided Adam and me through our wills years ago. "Evelyn," he said, "sit down. Let's go through this piece by piece." He spread the papers across the desk like a map. Property transfer, forged initials, falsified email. The evidence sat in tidy rows, my handwriting labeling each pile. I had already numbered them, 1 through 7. After half an hour, he removed his glasses and rubbed his temples. "This is bad," he said quietly. "But it's also good. You caught it fast. The forged signature and false email address, that's criminal. We can freeze the funds before they're fully disbursed." "Can we stop the sale?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "and we'll do it properly. No drama, no noise. We file for an injunction, claim fraudulent conveyance, and subpoena Madison's firm. You'll need to sign an affidavit." I took the pen without hesitation. The paper was thick, official, faintly rough beneath my hand. I signed my name carefully, each letter clear, the way I used to sign library cards when children received their first books. Tom glanced up. "You're handling this better than most." "I've spent my life filing things," I said. "This is just another file." That afternoon, we visited the bank together. The manager, a young man with slick hair and the faint scent of cologne, looked nervous when he saw Tom's business card. "Of course, Mrs. Brooks," he said, "we'll investigate immediately." Within minutes, they confirmed that the transfer of funds had been initiated through Madison's business account, not Ethan's. Tom asked for the timestamp. "April 14th, 2:17 p.m. the clerk read. 2 days before the phone call. I felt a small, sharp click in my chest. That was the moment they'd taken everything. While I watered the pear tree and sorted laundry, my son had watched my name vanish from the ledger. Tom spoke to the clerk quietly, in the tone of someone who knew exactly how systems worked. Within the hour, the funds were frozen. "We'll keep it quiet until we have the subpoena," he told me in the car. "If we alert them now, they'll cover their tracks." I nodded. "Then we'll stay quiet." Over the next week, we built the case. I spent hours scanning documents, labeling drives, writing timelines. At night, I slept in the motel, lulled by the low hum of the highway. I kept the folders stacked beside the bed like sentinels. Every morning, I wiped them with a soft cloth, as if order itself were a prayer. Tom called daily. "We're close," he'd say. "The district attorney's office wants a full packet." I learned new words: affidavit, forensic signature verification, constructive fraud. They became my armor. Each term added a layer between me and despair. By the following Friday, the case file was thick enough to make a sound when it hit the desk. Tom looked up from the stack. "Evelyn, you realize what this means? Madison could face prison. Ethan will be implicated for negligence at least." "I realize," I said. "But this isn't about punishment. It's about truth." He studied me. "You're not angry?" "I am," I said softly. "But anger wastes energy. I'd rather use precision." On April 30th, I visited the house one last time. The buyers hadn't moved in yet, the sale still legally contested. The front door opened with a push, they hadn't changed the lock. Inside, the air smelled of paint and emptiness. My footprints echoed on the bare floorboards. I walked through each room: the kitchen where Adam and I had danced once to a song neither of us remembered, the living room where Ethan had built his first fort out of couch cushions. The pear tree outside the window had begun to bloom again, white petals brushing against the glass like small hands. I whispered, "I'm sorry," though I wasn't sure to whom. To the house, perhaps. To the woman who had believed she could never be betrayed by her own child. Then I turned off the light, closed the door, and left the key under the mat for the last time. The following week, the court granted the injunction. The sale was suspended pending investigation. Madison's firm was notified of a fraud claim. I didn't attend the hearing, Tom handled it. But he called afterward. "You won," he said. "At least this round." "I'm not done yet," I said. He laughed softly. "I didn't think you would be." When the wedding invitation arrived, cream cardstock, gold letters, Ethan and Madison, May 18th, I stared at it for a long moment. Then I placed it on the stack labeled pending outcomes. Tom raised an eyebrow when I showed him. "Planning to go?" "Yes," I said. "Uninvited." He chuckled. "That's not in the legal plan." "Neither was theft," I said. We both smiled, thin and knowing. The morning of the wedding, I dressed in a navy suit Adam once loved. I packed a small envelope, sealed and addressed to the officiant. Inside were copies of the forged documents, notarized statements, and the DA's verification letter. On the flap, I wrote one word, truth. I didn't intend a scene. Only clarity. When I left the motel, the sky was clear for the first time in weeks. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and lilacs. I drove with the windows half open, my folders locked in the trunk. The church came into view, white, trimmed with ivy. Cars lined the street. I parked at the edge of the lot and sat for a moment, hands on the wheel. The woman who had arrived there weeks ago would have begged. The one sitting there now was quiet, certain, composed. I stepped out of the car, straightened my scarf, and walked toward the doors. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it walks in wearing sensible shoes and carries a single envelope. The church stood bright against the morning sky, white paint shining like porcelain, flowers everywhere. For a moment I almost turned back, not from fear, but from the weight of it all. Weddings should be sacred beginnings. But this one had been built on theft. I waited outside until the string quartet began to play. Guests filed in, laughter floating over the steps. Madison's family looked polished, self-assured, as if they had rehearsed their happiness. I slipped through the side door, quiet as habit. The scent of roses mingled with candle wax. Tom had warned me. "You don't owe anyone a scene," he'd said. "Just presents." "I'm not going to shout," I'd promised. "The truth will speak for itself." I sat near the back, the envelope tucked into my purse. It was light, not like vengeance, but like proof. The ceremony began precisely at 11. Madison entered on her father's arm, silk trailing behind her. She looked radiant, but radiance and goodness aren't the same thing. Ethan stood at the altar, handsome, polished, expressionless. When the officiant reached the line about lawful union, I stood. My knees didn't shake. My heels made a soft sound on the aisle carpet, each step measured. Heads turned, a hush spread like a ripple in water. I stopped beside the first row. "Before you continue," I said, my voice calm, "there's something you need to read." The officiant blinked, uncertain. "Ma'am, perhaps after." "No," I said gently. "Now." I handed him the envelope. He looked to Ethan, then to Madison. Her smile froze, a muscle twitching beneath her veil. The officiant opened the envelope and began to read aloud. The pages whispered as they turned: bank statements, notarized affidavits, signature analyses, confirmation from the district attorney's office. Whispers filled the room, spreading quickly. Madison's mother's hand went to her mouth. Ethan's shoulders stiffened, color draining from his face. When the officiant finished, he cleared his throat. According to this, the sale of Mrs. Brooks's home was fraudulent. A criminal investigation is underway. Silence. Then movement at the back of the church, 2 uniformed officers stepping inside. They approached slowly, quietly, as though even justice understood reverence. Madison whispered something to Ethan. He turned toward her, eyes wide. You said. I handled it, she hissed. The officers reached them. One spoke softly. Madison tried to stand tall, but her hand trembled as they asked her to come with them. She glanced at Ethan, no comfort there. He stood frozen, jaw tight, while every camera phone in the room recorded their undoing. They led her out gently, no handcuffs yet, only formal words. The white veil brushed the floor like a surrender flag. Ethan turned toward me then. His eyes searched my face, maybe for anger, maybe for love. I felt neither. Only the steady relief of completion. Mom, he said hoarsely. You didn't have to do this here. Yes, I said. I did. It's the only place you would listen. His lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. He looked young again, lost, frightened, the boy under the porch light. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Then I remembered the forged initials, the hollow line where my name should have been. The officiant cleared his throat. Shall we? Ethan shook his head. No, he said quietly. It's over. I left before anyone could stop me. Outside, sunlight flashed on the stained glass windows. The lilacs in the courtyard smelled faintly sweet, the same way they had in our old backyard. I walked to my car without hurry, every step releasing something old and heavy. By afternoon, the news had spread. Local realtor arrested for property fraud. The article included a photo, Madison, head bowed, escorted through courthouse doors. Ethan's name appeared too, under investigation for complicity. His employer released a statement that evening, "We have terminated Mr. Brooks effective immediately." Tom called just after sunset. They froze her accounts, he said. Every cent of the sale is intact. The court will overturn the transaction within a week. Good, I said. You handled it with more grace than anyone I've seen, he added. Grace, I repeated softly. It's just the shape truth takes when it finally stands up. That night, I sat by the motel window again. The rain had returned, thin, silver lines tracing the glass. I poured myself tea, the same way I always had, in the blue mug I'd carried with me. I thought of Adam's voice, of the promise Ethan had written long ago, "I will always take care of you, Mom." He had broken it. But I had kept my own, to manage, to endure, to act. Outside, a siren wailed briefly, then faded into distance. The world had balanced itself again, quiet but precise. I opened the window a crack and let the cool air in. Somewhere far away, another mother was probably setting a table, another son kissing her cheek. Life continued, ordinary and unguarded. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned off, leaving something cleaner, a steady flame of knowing. They had built their happiness on deceit, and deceit collapses under its own weight. I didn't have to destroy them. The truth had done that for me. I closed my laptop, blew out the candle on the desk, and whispered to the room, "Justice doesn't rush. It waits." And that night, for the first time in months, I slept without checking the lock twice. The week after the wedding felt like the slow turn of a heavy key. The injunction became permanent, the sale was voided. My house was legally mine again, though by then, I no longer wanted it. The rooms had been scraped clean of warmth. Every wall remembered betrayal. Even the pear tree seemed to stand at a distance. I walked through it one last time with Tom. "You could stay," he said gently. "It's yours, Evelyn." "I know," I replied. "But sometimes keeping something hurts more than losing it." The court returned full ownership, and within a month I sold the house myself, honestly this time. The final price, $425,000. Half of it I donated to a reading foundation for children. Adam would have liked that. With the rest, I planned a new beginning. Ethan called twice during those weeks. I didn't answer the first time. The second, I let it ring once before picking up. His voice was thin, almost boyish. "Mom." I just want to explain. I know everything, I said. I didn't mean, Madison said. You signed it, I interrupted softly. That's all that matters. He went quiet. I could hear traffic in the background, the city moving around him without pause. She's gone, he said finally. She left. Took what was left of the money, what she could withdraw before the freeze. My job, everything's gone. I felt no triumph, only a weary sadness. Ethan, I said, this is what happens when you trade trust for convenience. He started to cry, quiet, breathless. The sound was both familiar and foreign. I don't know what to do, he whispered. Start with honesty, I said. That's all I ever asked. Then I ended the call. 2 months later, I moved to Santa Fe. I chose it because of a photograph Adam and I had once kept on the fridge, a skyline washed in gold light, adobe walls against storm clouds. The first evening I arrived, the air smelled of rain and sage. My new home was a small casita on the edge of town, 2 rooms, wide windows, a porch facing the sunset. The realtor, a kind woman named Teresa, handed me the keys. It's simple, she said. That's what I want, I told her. Inside, I unpacked one box at a time, my books, the framed photo of Adam in his work apron, the blue mug, the gray scarf with the thin teal stripe. I hung a wind chime above the door. Its small notes carried through the evening like laughter remembered. The days found rhythm quickly. Mornings, I volunteered at the local library, shelving returns and helping children choose their first books. Afternoons, I walked to the market for fresh bread and peaches. At night, I sat on the porch with tea, watching the sky fade from coral to indigo. I didn't need more. Peace is rarely loud. One afternoon, a letter arrived from Ethan. No return address, just his handwriting, hesitant, uncertain. Inside was a single page. Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I see what I did. You taught me to value stories, but I turned ours into numbers. I'm starting over. I found work at a hardware store. I rent a small room. It's not much, but it's honest. I hope you're well. Ethan. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it between the pages of Adam's favorite novel, To Kill a Mockingbird. Forgiveness is a quiet act, not a spoken one. I didn't write back, but I didn't throw it away either. That was enough. By autumn, the air grew sharp and clean. The desert light shifted, longer shadows across the porch. I joined a book club, small and kind, 3 women my age, 1 young man who brought his grandmother's cookies each week. We talked about endings that felt like beginnings. One evening, Teresa stopped by with a flyer. We're starting an adult literacy program, she said. Would you help? I smiled. That's what I was made for. And so, on Thursdays, I sit in a circle with people learning to read for the first time. Their fingers trace letters slowly, reverently. Each time someone sounds out a word, I feel the world grow a little wider. Sometimes I tell them, every story has a second draft. You just have to start writing it. Occasionally, I still think of Maple Street. Not with longing, just clarity. I remember the smell of lemon polish, the sound of the refrigerator hum, the shape of light on the old rug. Those memories belong to me, not the deed. Ethan sent one more letter at Christmas. No apologies, just a card with a photo of a modest tree and a note, I'm learning. Merry Christmas, Mom. I placed it on the mantel beside Adam's photo. For the first time in a long time, the house felt full enough. I have no illusions that everything heals neatly. Some fractures remain, fine as hairlines in old porcelain. But they catch the light differently now. In Santa Fe, when the afternoon thunder rolls in, I sit on my porch, tea in hand, the scent of sage rising. I breathe. I lost a house, yes. But I found my self-respect in its ashes. And that, I've learned, is the kind of inheritance no one can steal. I live differently now, quietly, deliberately. The mornings belong to sunlight and coffee, the evenings to books and wine through the sage. No one calls demanding, no one takes without asking. Sometimes I hear the soft chime over my door and think of the way truth arrived, slow, sure, uninvited but necessary. I don't hate Ethan. Hatred is just another chain. I wish him a steady job, a roof, a conscience that keeps him awake when needed. We both learned something about ownership. You can lose walls and still keep your ground. When I lock my new door at night, I feel no fear. The key turns cleanly, honestly. Justice came and went, but peace stayed. If this story touched a nerve, you belong here. Subscribe, and stay for the truths we whisper where silence becomes strength. Because sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one that finally tells the truth.